Hi there and welcome to a Funky Loops tutorial. Today we're going to be looking at adding an extra colour into your mosaic. So traditional mosaic crochet is used two colours and you create the pattern. Sometimes you want another little pop of colour, so you might be wanting to add in some other colours. Usually that works best if you don't go too crazy and you just add little pops of maybe a second or the third colour into that. The more colours you add, the more complicated that it will be. So you just maybe want to add a little bit of extra colour into something. So if you are following one of my patterns that has colours added in, so for example, this blanket that I've shown you is from the Joyful Christmas Carol. It will tell you exactly in the written instructions when to change colour, so you don't have to think about it. But let's talk about the reasons why you change colour when you do, because sometimes people get confused that it's a bit earlier than you might expect. So I'm going to look at this pattern. This is the first pattern in the Joyful Christmas Carol that does change and add another colour in. You can see that it's working in red and yellow, but then there's a green that's been added in as well. So that's the first one in the pattern that has another colour. And if we find it on the blanket, let me just show you that when you look to the sides of your stitches, so if you're looking at your stitch, you always can see a little flash of the colour next to it. So you want to make sure that the colour that might be flashing through is the same colour as the colour that you want it to be, that you're looking at. So for example, here in this one here where I'm adding the green in, when I look to the side, it is still green that I'm seeing. I'm not seeing the yellow by mistake, or you know, that's something that's thrown through. I'm just going to show you another bit on the blanket. Where is it? Here, further up, here we go, yeah, further up on here, because of the way I had to write this pattern, because it changed straight there, I couldn't sort of have extra stitches. So you can just see that when I'm pulling that slightly to the side, it's actually the red that I can see under there, when I really would have rather that was a green. But sometimes that's what if you've got too many colours, they all join in the same place, then there's not a lot you can do to hide that. So, I mean, it's not the end of the world. From a distance, you wouldn't see it at all. But I like to try and make sure that the colours that are just poking through should be the colours that you're wanting for that particular part. So let's look at what that means then. So if I'm looking at my pattern, as I said, if you are following my pattern, this is already done for you. But if you wanted to take a pattern you've already got and add a little pop of colour in, then this is what you need to think about. In the row, so this row here that we're on, we were using a red and a yellow, and we're actually this would be on a yellow row. But when we come here, we're wanting to add this green in. Because we don't want to see any yellow poking from the sides of this green, when we're doing our first row of green, this bottom part of the green, we want to extend that green a couple of stitches either side, so that we won't see that coming down. Now the red is then going to come down on top of it anyway, so you're not going to see that base stitch as part of the pattern, but it just means that when you look at the edge of your colour work, you won't see that. So effectively on all of these bits where the green is the base part of the green, the first part, you want to just, or any part that the green is used, you want to just extend that by a couple of stitches. It could be 2 stitches, it can be 3 stitches, whatever. You would just want to extend that so that you don't get the wrong colour poking through. Sometimes that's what I said, if you, the way that your pattern goes, if you've got too many that come close together, you might not have the space to do that. Sometimes you might, even if you can just do one of that colour, then that can help. When you've got, for example, here you can see that the colours are right next to each other. So here there's not an awful lot that you can do to change that. I should have shown you that as an example. Let's have a look and see. on the blanket here. These meet up, so you might see a little bit of the wrong colour there. It's actually not looking too bad, but it saves you having the wrong colour. So that's really why you do that. So if you're going to be looking at a pattern of your own or a pattern that hasn't got that colour, then that's what you would consider, is just to make sure that your base row here is a couple extra stitches. So if you were following the actual chart, then you've got to think about that. If you're following the written instructions that have been written for you, like I have given you, then it's easy because it already tells you. So let's look at how we do that. So that's why we do what we do. Let's look at how. So I have already started this pattern and I've got to the row where we're going to add in the green. So we're on to this row here, this first row here, where we're going to add the green in. Now, following the written instructions, it tells us that we do this first part, which I've done, and then I'm going to do 5 stitches in my yellow. So I've done one already. 1, 2, 3, 4, and I've got one more to do. Now, this is when you change colour. You change colour in the last part of the stitch before you are going to want to sew. I've got to do 5 yellow stitches, so I've done 4. I start my 5th stitch, insert my yarn, bring my hoop, and I've got my 2 loops, and then I'm going to stop. So on my 5th stitch, I have not completed it. I still have to come through the 2 loops, but I'm going to do that with my 3rd colour, with my green. Okay, so I usually find it easier if I've made a little loop, because I'm going to put that loop on to my hook and I'm going to bring that through my stitches. Now what you want to do then is just to pull that all down tightly. So pull your green down at the back, pull your yellow down so that it's not loose. Okay, so that's showing us that we have done the 5 yellow stitches, but that we have started the green ready to do now. Now we're going to do 7 green stitches. Now again, it's 7 because we are doing a couple extra each side. Okay, so I've done 1. Now what I want to do to try and make it neat on the back is that I'm going to crochet over those stitches and carry my yellow along with me. So I insert into the next stitch and I make sure that my needle, or my hook, sorry, is below those colours, so that when I get my yarn and bring it through, if you can see it, I'm effectively then going to lock these colours in behind that yarn. Okay, yarn over and pull through too. And you can see I've kind of locked that in. So I'm going to do that again, insert, make sure it goes underneath the colours so that when I yarn over, I will pull that down on top of the colours, through, and again. So I've got 7 of these to do. And you're just making sure that you're catching in these colours. Now, that is a choice. If you don't want to catch in the colours, then you can obviously sew in the ends at the end, but I really hate having to sew in the ends, so I find that easier to do. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now, as I said, in fact, it's not 7, it's 11 we're supposed to do. 7 is the number that we have got. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's the number that we're going to end up seeing, but we added on to either side. So that's where our 11 is. So I've still got another 4 to do. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I'm going to change back to the yellow at the end of my 4th one. So I've not completed those 2 loops. I'm going to drop my green, I'm going to get the yellow, and I'm going to pull it through, and then pull down my green, pull down the yellow to make sure that it's tightened up, and then I start my 1st stitch. Now this little green bit here is my end, so I'm just going to ignore that part just now. In fact, what I'm going to do is actually just trim that off. So it has been, I've crocheted over the top of it. You can see this is the starting end, I'll chop that off now, so that's all been hidden. And I'm going to now do my yellow stitches. Now, when you're only doing a small bit, so on this pattern, that's the only bit of green that's going to be there on this row. You can carry the green all the way along. If I was doing this on the actual blanket, obviously I would have to go all the way along until the next part of green. You can carry that all the way along if you wish. I feel as if when you carry it when you don't need it, it's just a hassle and you're probably wasting yarn, and we don't want to waste yarn. So for me, if it's only a little bit like that, then what I will then do is I'll just do maybe about 4 or 5 stitches where I am crocheting over. So for example, here I have to do 5 yellow ones. So I'll just do those 5 and stitch over the top of it. And then I'm going to just then chop that off and get rid of it. Oops. So that I don't have to carry that anymore. So then I can just complete my row with the yellow as would be normal. And if you are using my method of crocheting over the end so that you don't have them, then obviously remember to pull your end in. Again, that's up to you. If you prefer to just have the fringes, that's okay, but I don't like having the fringes left, so I always crochet over my ends. I just find that easier, but that's up to everybody what they want to do. And finish off that row. Now, if we look at the back, chop off that bit that I crocheted over, you can see that we just have that bit of green that's showing and the bit of green on the front. Okay, so the next row is just going to be red. There isn't going to be any green on here. So I'm going to start that off and I'll join you when I'm about to get back to the green part on the next row. Okay, so I've started that next row with the red, and it's just to show that as we come to the green, we're doing our forward stitches with our red. And remember, we made 2 extra green stitches, but we're not going to actually see them. So when we go over, we're still crocheting what we're supposed to do with our red. So you can see I've hidden those stitches. We're not going to see them, but it means that when I then go into here and do my back stitches, that if I've got my blanket lying to the side or anything, that I still can only see green there, my green and the red. I don't want to see any yellow here because there's no yellow in the pattern at that part. So that's why we do these extra stitches, just to make sure that we're not seeing the wrong colour behind. Okay, so let's skip on to the next row. Okay, so I have started the next row that we are on to, which is this row here. So we are going to, I've started the first bit. The next instructions is to do 6 yellow and then 5 green in the back stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but remember we're not going to complete the 6th stitch, so 6, but then I'm going to stop. I'm going to get my green. And pull through the green loop. Pull that down, pull the yellow one down, just to make sure that it's nice and tight. Oh, it doesn't want to pull down to do it. Okay, then we're going to do our 5 back stitches in green. 1, 2, and remember that we are catching in this one, so we insert our hook and make sure it goes underneath the stitches and catch that in. Now, because I'm crocheting over my ends, I was crocheted over some of the yellow there. That's all right, you don't have to do that. But obviously I've got this yellow that I'm now carrying as part of this pattern. Remembering that although on our pattern we only are going to have 3 green stitches here, we have done 5 because we're going to hide some of those stitches behind. So we are then just going to go on and we're doing our front and back stitches. Now when you're doing the front stitches you can't really crochet over the ones at the back, so you just make sure you catch them when you are doing your back stitches. Okay, so we have got 5 back stitches now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the green, and then we're going to swap to the rail. So remember, I didn't complete my 5th stitch. I'm going to bring my yellow through, pull that down, and then I'm going to crochet over those. Now again, if you crochet over maybe 4 or 5 of the green stitches, that just locks them in place, and I can then just trim it off, and then I can carry on. Now I will show you the back of my blanket to show you how you might want to consider carrying. So as I said, I only carry what I really need to carry, because you don't want to be carrying lots and you don't want to be wasting yarn either. But sometimes you do get to the point where it's easier to just carry it all the way across. So for here you can see I'm only on the bits that I needed to. As I get further up this pattern and I get to the parts that are the widest, by the time you have used a bit to start it, used a bit to finish it, there's not going to be very much left in between. So sometimes you just get to the point where it's easier to carry it all the way across. So if we look at the back of my blanket here, we will see that this is the start of it, where I was just carrying the green a little bit. You can see where they were finishing each time, but then it got to the point where it was going to be finishing over here and you'd be starting a new bit. So these bits in the middle, I carried the green all the way across, and that might just be what is easier to do when you get to that point. Now, one other thing to consider is that if you have a few colours at once, so for example, in this one here, anybody's doing this pattern, this is the trickiest row here when we're doing the belt. And that is just because you have got the black and the yellow that you're using at the same time, when it's really a row that would be white. Yeah, I was just checking that there. It's a row that would be white. So when I'm doing the white row, I'm having to add in my black and I'm having to add in the yellow. So you've got 2 extra colours that you're adding in. And when you're carrying those extra colours, that can make your work a little bit bulky. So what I would suggest is, when you get to the point that you are carrying maybe 2 colours as well as the colour you're working with, what you can do is drop one of them and just carry one, and you can stitch the extra one back in. Or the other thing that I tend to do is, what I'll do is I'll stitch over one, the other one I'll just leave, and then I'll bring it up when I need to join it back in, and that will create a loose thread. So if you can imagine, if I had not crocheted over that, that would create a loose thread that I would then be joining on next time I'm using it, and it would create a line across the back. And what I would then do is on my next row, when I'm crocheting with my next colour, and it'll just be that one colour on its own, I would then bring that up and crochet over it onto the next row. And that can just help if you're getting too bulky, is save one of them to crochet over on the next row, because normally what you'll have is you'll have two or three colours on that one row, but your next row is usually just one solid colour. So for example here, every time I'm using the red, I'm only using the red, whereas when I'm using the yellow, I'm sometimes using the yellow and the green, but the red is always just the red. So if I was having a difficult time with crocheting over the top of two colours, I can just crochet over the top of one, let that hang, but join it back in when I'm using it, and then on my next row is pick that up and crochet over it then. And that can help if you get stuck with a bit of tricky parts. If you're finding, again, sometimes I think if you are doing it a little bit and there's just a little bit of colour, sometimes you are just as well letting it fall and you can quickly sew it in afterwards if it's just the odd bit, then that might be easier as well. Okay, so hopefully that will have helped you if you want to add some colour into your crochet. Let us know how you get on, and we'd love to see all of your work. Thank you.